essentially my paper focused on signing statements specifically because that's kind of the new presidential tool to expand the executive branch's power. I started my paper off, I really wanted to focus on the history of it, and within the first 150 years of the Republic, only a couple signing statements were really issued. Andrew Jackson was actually one of the first presidents to issue a couple of them, and Congress snapped back at him pretty harshly for, trying to encroach upon Congress's power. So from that humble beginnings of the signing statement, it developed into what it is today, but that took a while. Eisenhower himself, back in the 50s, only had 9 constitutional mandated signing statements, and by the time that got to George H.W. Bush, it was already in the triple digits. It was, expanded into 100 and something. And that was a slow progression. It started out at 9, then you get into like 20, 30, then before you know it's in the hundreds. And today, it's in the hundreds. So whether or not that keeps expanding, it's tough to say. But until something is stated about the signing statements, I think it's going to continue that way. So really got to get down to kind of what the signing statements are. Signing statements really got real big during the Truman administration. He had several hundred rhetorical signing statements, but rhetorical signing statements aren't the thing being abused today. Rhetorical signing statements are just kind of the president's opinion on the bill. Those have been done a lot longer than these new constitutional signing statements, which I'll get into more in a little bit. But these rhetorical signing statements, again, are just the president's opinion. It doesn't affect the bill in any way. It's just kind of the president putting his opinion out so the public knows what he thinks about the bill. And constitutional signing statements are the issue. Constitutional signing statements basically is the president putting on a bill and a certain provision of it saying, I believe this part of the bill to be unconstitutional, therefore I don't need to follow it, I don't need to enforce it. It works a lot like the line item veto, and some believe in a unitary executive theory of the executive branch, which basically means that the president has expanded powers under the Constitutional because he's supposed to faithfully execute the laws as said by the Constitution, and that is the part of the executive branch in the Constitution which allows for broad interpretation. Otherwise, his powers are specifically listed. He's got the power to veto a bill, he's got the power to sign a bill, or he's got the power to do nothing. And there's always been this push that those 3 things just aren't enough for the executive branch. So that's why things like signing statements have developed. And before that, kind of the heir to it was the line item veto, which was done under Clinton. Clinton had the power of the line item veto until the city of New York actually sued him because he marked out some provisions that were going to New York, money for the district basically. So the New York sued him. The Supreme Court found that the line item veto was indeed unconstitutional because of a very important part of the Constitution, which is the presentment clause. The presentment clause basically states that we have a bicameral House, so both the House and the Senate have to pass the bill, and then once the bill is passed, then the president, is supposed to do one of those 3 things, and the bill is supposed to be presented in whole what both houses decide. So because it was basically cutting out this presentment of the bill to the president, how it was supposed to flow, it was ruled unconstitutional. Same reason why the legislative veto was ruled unconstitutional, which again, some say this is why the president has to expand, because they're constantly fighting for power. And that is, to the founders' credit, that is still going on. I mean, all the branches are still fighting for power, mainly the executive and the legislative. The judicial branch power kind of stays the same, but they're always, the deciding force. But the legislative veto was ruled the same way, presentment clause. Basically, during the Immigration Services versus Chadha case back in '83, they showed that the Congress was trying to delegate power to a small branch of Congress to decide immigration issues, and they were basically telling the administrative, executive branch what to do. So Congress said, no, legislative branch, you can't tell these administrative agencies what to do. Not only that, but you have to pass things as a whole congressional body, not just as a part. So the presentment clause basically ruled the legislative veto and the line item veto unconstitutional. And so the new tool of use is, again, signing statements, getting back into this. Presidents today, George W. Bush is the one who really expanded it. He's the one who really set the book on it. But Reagan's lawyers were actually the ones who convinced him to use signing statements in this way. And they also convinced the judicial branch to go along with these signing statements to read them as, like, basically law. So Reagan's lawyers were the ones who really pushed this up. So these modern use and abuse of signing statements can really be attributed to the Reagan administration, not so much Bush, although Bush did it more than anybody else. It really started back during Reagan. Carter was actually the first one to use them in this way. So it's not any party alignment for president. It's purely just once presidential power expands, presidents like to take that power and roll with it. They're not going to just be, oh, I got all this extra power, I'm not going to use it, I'm not going to abuse my power like this guy did. It doesn't work out that way. So Obama said on the campaign trail he wasn't going to use signing statements. Turns out that part of his campaign message was indeed not true. He has continued to use the signing statements. Bush expanded that power very heavily. He's rolling with it. And until something is done about these signing statements, it's going to continue that way. Until the judicial branch steps in, which a lot of times they don't want to, because they give deference to the other branches. They don't want to tell the other branches how they're supposed to operate. So it's really going to take a lot of force against these signing statements to prevent their use. So my paper really just focused on how these signing statements developed, how they're being abused, and as far as the future of these signing statements would go, I can't give an answer. There's so many different factors that go into it. It's really going to take a strong push to do something against these signing statements before they stop being used in this abusive manner. So with that, I'm open to any questions.
If these signing statements have been such an integral part of legislation for the last 10 years since your presidency, I suppose, why hasn't the public had more information about what exactly is entailed in these signing statements and how they change the law?
Education. Public doesn't know. I actually had my mom skim over my paper for me for grammar because she's pretty good about picking up some of that, but she basically didn't even pick up so much on the grammar issues just because she was amazed signing statements existed. I mean, she didn't know. She knew about the line item veto. A lot of that was publicized, and part of the reason that was publicized is because it was a big deal. It was talked about on the news media. It was taken to the Supreme Court. I mean, anything taken to the Supreme Court has a lot of media coverage. And these signing statements kind of pass under people's view. I mean, I didn't know anything about signing statements before, taking this class. So a lot of people just don't know about it. And it's because it's kind of a sneaky way to do it. I mean, once they get the bill, they can just, mark their provisions on it. And the bill itself, it still passes a whole. It still goes through he's just not basically running the bill how it's listed to be run. And really, it's an illegal gray area. So the fact that he can even do this is because it's in that gray area of law. And it's becoming more of a modern abuse, again, just the last few decades. I mean, Eisenhower only had 9 constitutional, executive signing statements, and that's just blown up, especially ever since Reagan. And it was really Reagan's lawyers. They were brilliant legal minds, and they're the ones who said, this is a gray area law, we can really work in this. This is going to allow you to gain back power, because after Nixon, presidents kind of lost some power, public view of their power. Presidents were able to abuse their power, public realized it more. So the presidents kind of fight back to get the power over their branch again, because Congress had to basically go after Nixon. So that's kind of the reason this modern thing is going on, is because it's just a new thing, and I don't think the public's caught up to it yet. Once the public catches up to it, or it really becomes an issue again, like the line item veto, the city of New York said, hey, you can't cut our funding out, we're going to sue you. Until something like that happens, I don't think it's going to be renowned or get people popular support against it.
So there are no extrajudicial means to go about this? You said that the courts aren't going to do anything about it, and so we're basically stuck with it, but Congress isn't going to move to amend anything? There's no other options?
Well,
we're stuck with it?
I don't think we're stuck with it. I just think we're stuck with it until there's a push against it. Because there's a lot of scholars and academics that are writing against this, but I don't see enough of Congress saying, we're tired of these signing statements. There's nobody up on the floor saying, these signing statements got to stop now. There's none of that push in the government. Why there's not that push, I don't know. I think it's because Congress wants it secretly, which is why they pushed to have the line item veto, because Congress knows they're so just not able to pass anything anymore with, bill being proper, it gets a bunch of pork and a bunch of stuff unnecessary, that they want the president to be able to say, I'm not going to follow this, and that. And so I think Congress kind of sets themselves open to it.
Does this inform us at all about the fiscal cliff? Could President Obama use signing statements in a creative way to maybe even wrap all this problem up with or without negotiation from Congress?
You know, I hadn't thought about it, but based off of that and the growing power of executive orders, which I just touched a little bit on, so I'm not as knowledgeable there, but yeah. I mean, especially if something gets passed to him, he could say, all right, we'll concede. If Congress says, all right, we'll concede, we'll cut the spending to these entitlement programs, and it gets to the president, he can say, that's unconstitutional, I'm not going to follow this, and that, but the tax increases you agreed to, we're good. So could he do that? Yeah. And unless I'm sure that would cause pushback against signing statements, so. But yes, I mean, it's a legal gray area. It's a very interpretive thing, like all law. It's all how you view it. It's how you interpret it. So signing statements right now are here to stay. Whether or not they'd be abused to that extreme, I don't know, because then they'll get that pushback against it. The executive doesn't want that. The executive wants to be able to keep that power. So could Obama? Yeah. Could that hurt him in political support too? Yeah. I don't think the people would like the president to just be able to do away with what Congress says. But again, it just depends. Because a lot of Bush's growing signing statements gave more power to the executive for defense means, which civil liberty groups are scared of because, we like our liberties, we like to be able to be safe. It's like Ron Paul said, if we really wanted to, we could put a camera in everybody's house, have a camera follow everybody at any given point in the day to help possibly prevent a crime. But then what's the point of preventing the crime when you're having that kind of, basically, fascist system following your every move? It's not worth it to prevent the possible crime to, give away all your liberties. So it's tough to say where it's going to expand to, but maybe. Maybe Obama abuses it.
Well, and that gets us out of time, so thank you, Mike.